Today, I'll be talking about 10 drivers who could drive the 7 car in 2025. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. It was just shockingly announced earlier today that Corey LaJoie will not be returning to Spire Motorsports in 2025, meaning that the number 7 car is officially available for somebody to drive going into 2025. So today, I'm going to talk about who I think, and there are 10 drivers I think have a good chance and opportunity. We'll talk about the 10 drivers who I think have a great chance and opportunity to drive the 7 car in 2025. So anyways, let's go ahead and just jump straight into it. The first driver who could drive the 7 car in 2025 is Kyle Busch. Now, Kyle Busch is currently under contract with Richard Childress Racing technically through 2025. But there's a few reasons why I think this actually is a very strong possibility. Number one, we know Kyle Busch is extremely unhappy right now at Richard Childress Racing. The performance is not there. He's been struggling. He's been making a lot of mistakes, and a lot of those mistakes is because the RCR team doesn't have the pace and speed. There's been a lot of management problems over there, and like I mentioned, we know Kyle Busch has been super unhappy with Richard Childress Racing over the last year or so. You go back to North Wilkes when we got in the fight with Ricky Stenhouse Jr., he was very unhappy with him. The second reason why I think there's a good chance of this happening is because of the fact he actually has a working relationship with Spire Motorsports. Remember, it was announced back in October of last year that Spire Motorsports had purchased Kyle Busch Motorsports Truck Series program and also had purchased the building, and that's where Spire Motorsports is currently listed at the moment. And the third big reason why is because Rodney Childress, I think if you team up Rodney Childress with Kyle Busch right now, I think both Rodney Childress and Kyle Busch would have a lot of success, and they would be really upfront on a week-by-week basis. While yes, Spire Motorsports may not be as good of a team like RCR, I actually kind of disagree with that. I think that they're kind of getting ahead of RCR, and look at the pace and speed. If you bring a driver like Kyle Busch over to the 7 car next year, I do think he will lead this team and really help Spire Motorsports to continue to grow. He's over there helping their Truck Series program, and look how many wins that Spire program's had. Kyle's won 2 races. Roger Cruif's gotten a win. Nick Sanchez, because Rev Racing's got an alliance with Spire, they've got a couple wins this year. And it just seems like Kyle Busch would be the best fit of anybody on this list to go there. I think Kyle Busch, like I said, would be able to really help the program grow. He'd be able to develop that program, make their team better. And I think that a duo of Rodney Childress and Kyle Busch together would be extremely incredible. Rodney Childress has really helped build drivers back up. He nearly won races with Mark Martin, nearly won races with Scott Riggs, and also, of course, won a couple races with David Rudiment and Brian Vickers as well. I think if you bring Kyle Busch back to Spire, or bring him over to Spire, I think he'd do great things. Now, they would have to buy him out of his contract currently with Richard Childress Racing, but I think with the money that Spire has right now, with the Gamebridge money, I think it would not be that difficult to do it. So I think there's a really great chance and a very strong possibility that we could see Kyle Busch go to the 7 car next year. If things work out, they could buy his way out of his contract with RCR. The second driver who could join the 7 car for Spire Motorsports in 2025 is Zane Smith. Now, Zane Smith currently is under contract with Spire Motorsports through this year, but of course he's being loaned out by Trackhouse Racing. Now, this would be a very easy move to make, to move him into the number 7 car, because Zane is a solid race car driver in my opinion, but also has a working relationship with the team. And also, if I'm not mistaken, I think Zane almost has a working relationship with Kevin Harvick Incorporated, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong on that, but basically Rodney Childress working with Zane Smith would be a really good move. And like I've already mentioned, Zane Smith is already currently driving for Spire Motorsports, which would make this transition very, very easy. We know Zane is in talks and conversations to maybe go to an organization like Front Row Motorsports as well, but if it doesn't end up going to Front Row Motorsports next season, I could definitely see him going to an organization like Spire Motorsports or staying at Spire Motorsports next year, and he would be in a car that I think would be more competitive. Zane is really figuring out right now at Spire Motorsports. The pace is showing up. The speed is there. He's consistently up front, or starting to show up front. His average finish has been getting better, and he's been improving his standings. And if he got the chance and opportunity to continue driving the 7 car next year, or get in the 7 car next year, I do think he'd be able to help out that program and make that number 7 team a lot stronger. So I think there's a good chance that this ends up happening too. I think he's one of the favorites to get behind the wheel of this car. Like I said, he could still end up at Front Row Motorsports next year, but I do think there's a really good chance also that Zane Smith may or may not end up in the 7 car next year and continue driving for Spire, so Trackhouse can keep their contract, with rumors of SVG moving up to full-time Cup racing in 2025. The third driver who could drive the 7 car in 2025 is Carson Hocevar. Now, Carson Hocevar does have a multi-year contract to technically drive the number 77 car. But I think if you team Carson Hocevar up with Rodney Childers going into next year, I think both, like kind of similar to Zane Smith and Kyle Busch, I think both of them would gel very, very well. Carson Hocevar has been the best driver at Spire Motorsports this year. And if you would have told me that coming into this year, I kind of would have laughed at you. Not because I don't think Carson Hocevar is untalented, but because a lot of mistakes he makes on the track. But Carson Hocevar has been super impressive so far this year. And he's got a multi-year deal with the team. We know there's been teams looking at him for next year, but he's expected to stick around with Spire Motorsports. And I think he'd be an easy plug-and-play driver to put behind the wheel of the number 7 car and maybe move another driver like Zane Smith to the 77 or maybe move Michael McDowell to the 77. That could certainly be an option and possibility as well. But I do think Carson Hocevar, I rate him as a really high talent. I think there's a good chance that you see him in the number 7 car next year as well. Remember, he made his Cup Series debut in that number 7 car, substituting for Corey LaJoie, who of course substituting for Chase Elliott when Chase Elliott was suspended after what happened at the Coke 600 in 2023. I do think that Carson's got a lot of talent. He's a really great driver. I think he's a future Cup champion in my opinion, and I think he's someone who could really be the future of Spire Motorsports going into the near future. I think he's a great talent, has a lot of talent, and I do think that Carson Hocevar would be an amazing driver to put behind the wheel of this seat next year, and I think moving him from the 77 to 7 would be a good move, but I don't know if Rodney Childers will want it, but I think it'd be a good work to have both of them working together in the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series season. The fourth driver who could drive the 7 car for Spire Motorsports in 2025 is Michael McDowell. Now, Michael McDowell, we know, will be leaving Front Row Motorsports at the end of this season to drive the number 71 car, technically, for Spire Motorsports, where there have been rumor speculation that Travis Peterson also could be falling over to the team. But with the plans changing around, with Corey LaJoie leaving the organization, I think Michael McDowell to the number 7 car would actually make a lot of sense. Michael McDowell is known for building up programs. Look what he did for Front Row Motorsports. He really built that program up. They've gotten so much better over the last couple of years, and both of their cars at times this year have been in the top 20 in the standings. And we've seen that 34 car. Now they've got a Tier 1 alliance thanks to the stuff that Michael McDowell was really able to do for the Front Row organization. He's gotten a couple wins for the team. And now you look at Todd Gilliland too. He has gotten super better at that organization. And I think if you put him in the 7 car, I think he would do a lot of great things to Rodney Childers, and I think he could be a surprise candidate to make the playoffs next year. Now, obviously, like I said, there is also a really great chance and a very strong possibility that Michael McDowell does stay in the 71 car or go to the 71 for sure next year. But I think with this Corey LaJoie news coming out that he's not returning to the team next year, I think you've got to consider Michael McDowell a very legitimate candidate to get behind the wheel of this car. He's also got a little funding with him. They're expecting that Loves is going to stick around with Front Row going into next year, but we do know there's some other big changes coming over at Spire. We know Andretti's rumored to be coming in, but I think Michael McDowell should absolutely be considered as a candidate to, instead of maybe putting him in one of the other cars, the 71, maybe we should consider putting him in the number 7 car next year and working with Rodney Childers and continue to build Spire Motorsports up as an organization. The fifth driver who could drive the 7 car for Spire Motorsports in 2025 is Sam Mayer. Now, Sam Mayer is being looked at by at least one Cup Series team currently at the moment for 2025, and that, of course, is Front Row Motorsports. And many people are starting to lean that he could be the lead candidate for that number 36 or whatever number Front Row decides to run next year. But what if he doesn't go to Front Row next year? Well, I think the 7 car would be a really strong option. Now, here's my thoughts on Sam Mayer. I think Sam Mayer is definitely a very talented race car driver. He's won 6 of the last 31 or 32 NASCAR Xfinity Series races and has been solid at times, but he's also been very inconsistent and has made a lot of mistakes. Remember, he took out Shane Van Gisbergen not too long ago at Pocono right before the break happened. And that might be one thing that hurts him getting a chance, and he also kind of made that mistake at Indianapolis as well. He's very talented, but he's also super young. And I think putting a lot of pressure on him in the 7 car, working with one of the best crew chiefs in Rodney Childers, I think that definitely could hurt him for sure. But I do think Sam Mayer is a super talented race car driver who I think would be a really great candidate to put in there. And having a young driver to work with there would also make a lot of sense long term. I think you have to consider him as a major possibility. I think you have to consider him as a candidate because he also brings a little sponsorship with him. Though Spire is not going to have any issues with that with Gainbridge coming on. but I certainly do think that Sam Mayer will be a really solid candidate to go with if there is a chance to put him in there. I think he will be considered for sure. I think Spire will be looking at him if he doesn't go to front row. I think they'll definitely be looking at potentially putting Sam Mayer behind the wheel of the number 7 car for 2025 if other candidates do not end up becoming available in 2025. The 6th driver who could drive the number 7 car for Spire Motorsports in 2025 is Christian Eckes. Christian Eckes currently competes in the Truck Series for McAnally Hilgeman Racing, but we do know he's been a driver that's been in the running for multiple organizations. Originally, about a month ago, it got reported by Bob Pockers that basically Christian Eckes was being looked at by Front Row Motorsports. Now, it sounds like currently at the moment, it's kind of coming down between 2 drivers for that seat, that being Zane Smith and Sam Mayer. Another team that's been looking at him is an organization like Kaulig Racing. Kaulig Racing and then him have had conversations from what I understand, and they were looking at maybe putting Christian Eckes in one of their rides for 2024. Of course, it did not end up happening. I think Christian Eckes would be a really strong, great candidate to put in the seat and someone to work with as well. I think Christian's a very talented driver. He's been one of the better drivers so far this year, and I think he's done overall a very excellent and fantastic job. He's got a lot of talent. He does the best in equipment and does some great things. And he's got a really great chance to win the Truck Series Championship as well. Let's not forget that. And I do think that Christian will be a great driver move up. Plus, a lot of Truck Series drivers, they do really well when they move up the Cup because the truck is kind of similar to the Cup Series car, that next-gen car. I think that Christian would be a really good candidate, and I think he is 100% being considered by the Spire Motorsports organization as another young driver that they could build up going into the near future. The 7 driver who could drive the number 7 car for Spire Motorsports in 2025 is Shane Van Gisbergen. This one might be one of my bolder ones who could drive the 7 car, but hear me out. I think SVG is still more than likely going to end up in a Trackhouse Cup Series car next year, but because we are expecting that Trackhouse Racing is going to get a 3rd charter and get it from SHR. But let's say Trackhouse Racing all of a sudden decides not to buy a 3rd charter out of nowhere. Well, the 7 car becomes available. And another big thing that kind of helps this is that SVG is a Kevin Harvick Incorporated client. And Rodney Childers, of course, we know, worked with Kevin Harvick for many, many years. I think Shane Van Gisbergen put behind the wheel of the 7. Well, I don't know if he'd be as good as he was at a team like Trackhouse, perhaps. I still think he'd be a very solid race car driver. Now, again, I still think it's more than likely that Shane Van Gisbergen is going to end up in a Trackhouse car in 2025, and that's probably not coming too far down the road from being officially announced. But I do think SVG may end up eventually being considered for this organization in 2025 as a potential possibility to go to Spire Motorsports. The 8th driver who could drive the number 7 car for Spire Motorsports in 2025 is Justin Haley. This one caught me a little bit by surprise, but Bob Pockers actually reported that because he's worked with Spire Motorsports in the past, we could see Justin Haley potentially become a client for this team. Now, we do have to remember one thing. He has stated publicly that he's more than likely going to return to Rick Ware Racing next year. But I think you've got to look at Justin Haley as a slight candidate. And I think you look at Spire Motorsports, and they're really building up a program. And if you have Justin Haley work with Spire Motorsports, I think that would work very, very well because he's worked with them in the past. So it would make a ton of sense for it to happen. But also at the same token, same time, he's got a really good working relationship with Rick Ware Racing. So I don't know if it's really going to happen at this point, but I think if you look at what he's done with Rick Ware and what he's done in the race he's ran in Cup for many years, I do think that Justin Haley could be a very solid candidate. I don't know if it's going to be a realistic possibility of him moving up next year, but I certainly think, not moving up, basically going to this team, but it could certainly be an option for 2025 where he could go to Spire. The 9th driver who could drive the 7 car for Spire Motorsports in 2025 is Rajah Caruth. Rajah Caruth currently drives the number 71 truck for Spire Motorsports in the Craftsman Truck Series, and he is very liked by Hendrick Motorsports and HendrickCars.com. And Rajah, in my opinion, is a very talented driver. Now, do I think he's fully 1,000% ready to make the jump up to Cup? Maybe not. You might say that he's not ready to really make that jump. But I do think Rajah Caruth is a very talented driver who I think will end up in Xfinity for sure next year. He could definitely go to Spire's Xfinity program if they open up their Xfinity program again. But I think he's got to be a consideration because of what he's done over the last year. He just won his first Truck Series race at Las Vegas Motor Speedway not that long ago, and I think he does have to be at least considered as a potential candidate for Spire Cup Series ride next year. Now, I think it's not as likely that it's going to happen, but I do think that Roger Crew could for sure be a candidate for this ride in 2025 with the Spire Motorsports organization. And a 10th final driver that I think is a consideration for the 7 car for Spire Motorsports is Sammy Smith. Sammy Smith currently drives the number 8 car for Junior Motorsports in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, and I think he is being considered at least a little bit. One, Sammy Smith has sponsorship from, of course, some of the sponsors that Mike Manette used to have, the Peterbilt brand, and Allstate, and some of those other companies as well. But also, of course, he has driven for Spire Motorsports in the Truck Series. He made select Truck Series starts with Spire Motorsports this year. And I think even though he may not be ready to make the jump up yet, he does have the sponsorship and funding that could really go with it. So I could definitely see him maybe making the move up for sure if he does bring the sponsorship with him, which luckily for him, he does have those companies that work with Michael Annett. So I think there's a chance and possibility that we could definitely see him move up because of the sponsorship. I don't know if he's ready to make the jump up for sure at this time, but I do think Sammy Smith will probably be considered for one of these rides in 2025. So those are the 10 official drivers who are candidates that I think are official. Here's some honorable mentions. Nick Sanchez. Nick Sanchez drives a 2 truck for Rev Racing. I think he's done so far a very solid job with the Rev Racing organization this year. I don't think he's ready to move up just yet, but I think he will be a candidate in the near future. You've got other drivers like, of course, some people like Justin Allgaier, perhaps, maybe. He could be an outside candidate for sure. Matt DiBenedetto could be a candidate to drive a 7 car, but realistically, I think he's going to stay with Viking Motorsports next year or go to SHR, or not SHR, Haas Factory, perhaps. And then, of course, some people would maybe even say Haley Deegan or something like that, or even Bubba Wallace as well. But both of them are probably going to have rides next year in their respective series. So who do I think is most likely to go to the 7 car? Well, I think it's between Kyle Busch, Zane Smith, Carson Osbar, Michael McDowell. I think it's going to be between Kyle Busch and the current Spire drivers at the moment. And I'm going to give the honor to Kyle Busch, honestly. I think Kyle Busch is too pissed off right now at RCR, and I think he wants a natural reset, and I think he'll have that reset at Spire Motorsports in 2025. So that is going to be for the special video on 10 drivers who could drive the 7 car in 2025. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel with notifications on so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support on Patreon as well. Let's go below that and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. Who do you think drives 7 car next year? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. More than likely, tomorrow on the channel, we're going to have basically the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series schedule predictions dropping. Then we might have silly season predictions for 2026 dropping. And I've got some other big content dropping over the course of the next couple days. And there'll be a news video most likely on Monday. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode. And I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.